Welcome to our Bucky call for Saturday, June 21 and 22, depending on where you are. And we've started our call and we started getting to an interesting discussion about domain. And it dawned on me that really ought to be on a recording for anybody who's following this along, and especially for me. So let's take a minute and get started. Joe, when it's convenient for you, how are you feeling, and what would you like to get out of today's call?
I'm feeling, kind of okay. I must admit, I had a pretty intense headache a little bit earlier. In a hospital, not for myself, obviously for my family, my mother. But I'm remaining hopeful, and it's a reminder of the fragility of life. And checking in with you guys, it's always good to see you, um, and looking forward to looking into a little cosmic hierarchy.
Really cool.
So, Richard, how you feeling? What do you want to take away from today?
Well, I guess if I play on words, I'm feeling really cool, as in cold. We're into a pretty miserable weekend of winds and fairly heavy rains and cool weather. And when you look around, Eastern Canada is sort of is in a heat wave. And I was on Trim Tab this morning, and the Colorado participants are talking about how hot it is there, and uh, Texas is hot. so, um, and and I came off a Trim Tab meeting this morning where we're focusing on different sections of synergetics, and boy, it's heavy reading and heavy discussion when you try and tear out every little piece in one of those synergetic statements. Um, and I sit there basically um, marveling how the hell Fuller put all that together in the first place, and where he got the time, and where he was sitting. And I know he was working with Applewhite, but to get all of this content down in those synergetics books in the level of detail that he has it in there, which of course makes it very hard to unpack everything that he was trying to get across in those sections. Um, so it just, and the other thing is that um, as I'm paying attention and listening to some other podcasts or webinars that I'm involved in, where they're really talking about uh, whether consciousness and materialism are actually together. And then the other big question is the chicken and egg question about, does consciousness come out of matter, or is consciousness something that is present in itself? And it really fits with some of our cosmometry discussions. But a lot of these scientists feel that, in a sense, there's a breakthrough coming where materialism and spirituality, or that sort of thing, are going to be married in a way that works. Um, and it's a little bit like Bohm's undivided wholeness idea, rather than um, divided wholeness that separates things out. And yet all of this, you can hear, in my mind anyway, you can hear Fuller in the background saying, yeah, that's what I was talking about. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. And so you keep wondering, why isn't it surfacing for people to say, oh yeah, I read Bucky Fuller, I'm associated with his work, and he was talking about this years ago. But I never hear any real reference to Fuller, um, which is really quite intriguing and disappointing. But So what do I want to get out of this is that to be reading and discussing Fuller the way we do is, in my mind, has us on a leading edge that someday others are going to see that kind of light. And I guess it's rather interesting to even say what I'm saying now, having just turned on my computer a little while ago and saw that Trump's I'll make up my mind about Iran in 2 weeks. Took 2 days and he's already attacked. So who knows what's going to unfold now out of all the kind of conflicts that are going on around the world. And, you know, Fuller, however he said it, basically was saying that we got to get rid of weaponry and we got to get engaged in livenry. And the weaponry people keep persuading us that the only way you can get to livenry or peace is through war, which seems to be a really major oxymoron, I guess. How do you get peace through war? Lasting peace. Yeah. So I'm complete.
Quite disturbing, Richard.
Yeah.
No, this whole political thing is quite mind-blowing to me. I agree with you. Are you passing it over to me now? I don't want to trounce on
Yeah,
you.
sorry. Yeah.
All right.
Over
That's
to you,
okay.
Stephen. How are you?
Pretty good. And I'm real tired. I've got a real estate project that is got a statute of limitations that runs out on the 17th, and so, or on June 27th, and so their goal is to get this thing in on Tuesday or Wednesday before the last minute. I think that there would be some, it's not absolutely, if you're not in by 5 o'clock on the 27th, you're dead, but people I'm working with have been, it's been real tough for me, and I've been up late at night and early, and I haven't been going to yoga, and for the last 3 weeks, I haven't done much of anything except doing this thing, and I'm on this close to getting it done. So that's kind of got me going. And I think as you talk about consciousness and you talk about the Bucky revolution that started back in '85 and how now we're just starting to talk about it, and if we understood it, we'd have a better understanding of what is this whole thing of this domainness and this idea of going from the center, any vertex in the IBM, and then coming out in 12 degrees of freedom, 12 radii that are of equal distance. It seems to me to really understand this concept of vector equilibrium, domain, vertex, and surface as duals, which seems to be what we've been reading about, that it's important to understand topology. Because in the concept of topology, there's a really neat metaphor that a donut and a coffee cup are the same thing. And if you watch a video of the donut being squished on one side and then being punched in on the side it's squished on to create a little cup, and then as you shrink the ring and make the cup bigger, you have a coffee cup. And then as you smash that cup part and then start smushing it back in, you have a little ring with a big knob, and as you keep pushing the clay around, you suddenly have a donut again. It's a really great video. I hope I described it fairly well here. It seems to me with that understanding, I get a better idea of what this is all about. And what you mentioned, Richard, is these people are talking about these concepts. Donald Hoffman is big on the fact that the underlying basis of all material matter of all matter is consciousness. And when asked what's under that, what does consciousness look like? He says it looks like an amplituhedron, which is kind of crazy because an amplituhedron is a much more complicated concept of a super vector equilibrium. You know, Bucky has it down to take the cube octahedron and watch it grow and expand, and you have these different things. And as you guys have been reading here, any point in the isotropic vector matrix, any point, take any cross of any point, and you can create the cube octahedron off of that. And as it says here about domain, it says something about domain. So, and it seems to me it's a perfect conversation about any point is the beginnings. That's relativity. That, you know, relativity seems to fit there, that everything's relative to the observer, depending on, you know, the center of the universe is where you are, which is exactly what this seems to be saying. And it goes along with this idea, the ideas you're talking about. So I'm looking forward to this discussion. And with that said, you started talking about, because we were talking before the recording about domain, you started mentioning Thomas Kuhn and the Scientific Revolution book. Joe mentioned it's about a paradigm shift. You brought that up. You were talking, and I interrupted you so we could get that on the call. So, like, start from domain and Thomas Kuhn and Kuhn and start that conversation again, because it seems real powerful. If you would.
Yeah, well, I was talking about Thomas Kuhn from the paradigm change, the paradigm shift idea. What it's really all about is even why he named his book Scientific Revolution, why revolution was in the title and not, say, evolution. And basically what he was saying, that when you get a new paradigm and the people who are supporting that paradigm, when something new comes along and they want to move the paradigm or shift the paradigm, the original sort of defenders dig in their heels and they resist, and they won't allow that change to occur and without a fight, and therefore a revolution has to occur in order to move from one paradigm to another. And then as soon as a new paradigm occurs, then those proponents lock in and they hold firm. And so paradigm shifts have to be moved, if you want, through revolution and not evolution. But Kuhn also talked about paradigms meaning sort of like-minded people getting together and forming, if you want, a group or a discipline or a science. And then you're guided by ethics and beliefs and values and knowledge content, and then you deliver whatever you do within the paradigm of that particular discipline. So you have to, if you're a physicist, you have to do what the physicist paradigm has taught you to do, and so forth. Now, when I got into some of Kenneth Wilber's books, he was writing about science and what is science versus like spirituality and those sorts of things. And he concluded that anything can be a science as long as it has a distinguishable or definable domain or area in which it does its work, and it has a methodology or a set of methodologies that are open to challenge. And as long as you've got those two things working together, you can call whatever you do the science of whatever. And the moment you
Does he mean falsifiable when
yes,
he's saying open to challenge? Okay.
yeah, it's, and so again, as soon as you begin asserting that something is not challengeable, it's the truth, then you're slipping into dogma. And in many ways, that's what materialistic science has turned into. And the critics are basically talking about it being scientism, as if it's sort of a dogma, and it won't allow other kinds of ways of knowing inside its domain. But then the other thing about domain is that it has the ring of dominion over. And so it also can sound offensive to people who feel that, well, like colonialism, for example, has defined a domain that says you can have dominion over. And so that way, domain is maybe not the best choice of a word to describe the area in which one does its work or their work. So I just find that really intriguing. And for me, in using the tetrahedron and the minimum system idea and systemic and systematic, I treat systemic patterns and as sort of domain-like, and systematic as methodology, procedural-like, and systematic in the science sense, according to Wilbur anyway, has to be open to being falsified in terms of whatever measurables or results that you discover, that, and they may be hard truths, let's say, but as long as you're open to something coming along and falsifying that, you continue to be part of a science. And again, we talked about buckyballs at the beginning, and of course, for the longest time, it was pretty much decided that there's only two forms of carbon, period, graphite and diamond, and that there will not be another one found. And so when one was found, it gives you another element of truth, but I guess you have to be open to that being falsifiable as well, in the sense that maybe there's another form of carbon at some point that'll be discovered, who knows. And so that's that's what domain has been doing to me for the last number of years, in terms of trying to define the area in which you do your things or you operate out of, and then what are the systematic sort of methodologies that attach to that. So I'm complete on that part.
Well, and Joe, you've had some experience with that. I have some thoughts, but I'd love to hear if you have anything about it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I have a couple things really quickly, but one thing I would ask Richard really quickly is, how does your idea of ontology relate to a domain?
Well, that has to do with the if you want, the position that's taken about what is real. And so, and if you follow Bohm's ideas, where he sort of roughed out that there's the ontology of reality that says we exist in a divided whole, which is what a lot of Western science is all about, a la carte, Descartes. And undivided whole is that deep interconnection sort of idea, which is what Bohm was about, and what I think Fuller was all about with his whole systems. And I think those who are now looking at consciousness and material science actually being interlocked with each other, and always have been, that concept of reality would also be an undivided whole ontology of reality. So yeah, whatever your domain rests on, if your domain rests on a undivided whole or a divided whole, that will have a bearing on how it unfolds and how one works within it or treats within it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I thought about it from, another perspective as well, as this idea of like a meta level ontology. And then there's this kind of like a domain level, which is, kind of, as you were saying, just a moment ago, is a um, specific area of interest. And then you can go down to that, from there to the process level, which is, similar to what you were saying a moment ago. But there's also this, one of the things that was really important about Kuhn is that things have to hit a critical mass in order for things to change, in order for there actually to be a paradigm shift. So, when we're talking about paradigm shifts, it's not necessarily just challenging. It's that there is an urgency, a crisis, so to speak, that comes up. So that in order to change, so an example would be something like, with fossil fuels in the environment, could, change the way actually lead to a paradigm shift in how energy is essentially consumed. And so, that's one example, but it's partly driven by an environmental crisis. So there's these external factors that have a direct impact as to why the paradigm shift exists. I mean, it also requires, as Richard was saying, is that the challenging of existing models. So how that challenge leads to new approach to a new normal.
Yeah.
And as Richard was saying, then the new normal has to be able to be challenged, or it's dogmatic.
Right.
And so, from that perspective, that's I think that's, it's the essential part, one of the essential parts is that when do things hit a critical mass? Because I was even talking to somebody about this even earlier this week. It's when you're really looking at change being made, something has to finally hit a point where enough people are invested in something different. And so then that's how people are now looking at it as, there's more to be gained, and what is being lost is really not, it needs to change. In a way, I think that this relates to Bucky's Utopian Oblivion. I do. So because when you make these choices on which direction to go,
yeah,
I think that it really is utopia and oblivion. And as you had mentioned a moment ago, Richard, even we're talking about killing and living. In some ways we're at that crossroads right now. And so, and I think that to be perfectly honest, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, the other thing too is that, the critical mass theory is kind of connected to, if you want, linear types of sciences. And then there's also critical incident, which is your chaos butterfly effect possibilities, nonlinear science. And so it's another one of these both and. It might in fact take
it's just part of Kuhn's model. I'm just saying
critical mass to change. but sometimes it's just a small incident or a critical incident that actually
Sure.
tips the change, and the
Sets off a chain.
tipping
Yeah.
point idea.
Oh, sure. I mean, but it always starts with something. You know, it obviously starts somewhere.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I mean, so that's always where a paradigm shift is going to occur. And I guess, you know, it's just what I think, you know, as far as Kuhn saying how the new normal emerges, you know, it needs a certain degree of urgency. And so when you look at it from that perspective, you know, that's critical to one of his cycle. And I'll pull up the cycle in a minute. I'll put it in the chat. But yeah, I mean, I think it is interesting to think about Kuhn's theories. You know, but they are challenged too. Even his theories are challenged as well. You know, so it's which is important.
Mhm.
You know, it's I'll leave it at that for now.
Well, Mano has joined us. Before I comment on what was going on, how are you feeling, Mano? And what do you expect to get out of today's call?
Feel well rested. I'm just boarding the train. I realized that I'm an hour late, so I expect what you guys expect. I'll welcome it.
Cool.
Oh,
Cool beans. Are you complete then for your,
yes, yes.
all right. So
I
as I
like
hear
the
you,
metaphor of just boarding the train. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
talk about a paradigm or a domain. There's the train. You know, when we were talking about this a while ago, um, I drew a little diagram. I ended with my share on this, and if you guys don't mind, I'll share. But what we talked about, what I talked about was this standard definition of domain. I think that maybe what this should be, it should be the colloquial, you know, definition of domain. In other words, when people think of domain, they think of an area or a paradigm, and um, and so they create these little boxes and say this is quantum physics here, but really the whole universe is out there. And I think that, and I talked about different ways that people, you know, when you look at the universe from different locations, it looks different. And this goes back to what I think Bucky's saying about the idea of the vector equilibrium can be anywhere in the isotropic vector matrix, and that every point in the isotropic vector matrix can be a vector equilibrium, and therefore it becomes its own domain. And so, you know, sticking with this traditional idea, I thought instead of these boxes like this, that it might be better to do something like this, where you have boxes, but then you have the universe swirling around in different way. At first, I did those straight lines, but then remembering there are no straight lines in the universe, I went to this idea that everything is toral, everything is turning clockwise and clockwise, clockwise and counterclockwise simultaneously. Everything is going in and out simultaneously, and that's why I think the concept of a topological discussion about domain is really where Bucky is. And the human brain wants to map the domain in a three-dimensional reality, and I think Bucky's inviting us to go someplace else. On page 155 of this book, here's the definition of domain. A domain of a sphere is defined as the region closer to a given sphere's center, which would of course be a vertex, right? Than to the center of any other sphere. this necessarily includes the sphere itself as well as the portion of its surrounding gap that is closer to the sphere than any other. And when I hear those words, to me, I start thinking topologically. And it's not closer. I don't think he's saying closer on a three-dimensional map. I think he's saying closer energy-wise. And if we go back to the traditional concept of domain, where you have these, oh, this is my domain here, and then we have this domain that includes part of this domain and includes part of that domain, but certainly not the rest. This is like becomes exclusive, and we start looking at the universe as a domain, as a part. And I think what Bucky's definition is giving us is saying, look, you have the whole universe at any sphere's center, which goes to the theory of relativity. You are the center of the universe from your relative position. I'm the center of my universe from my relative position. And if I'm willing to include some concept of consciousness and quantum physics, I start breaking down these standard three-dimensional domains, because I'm not talking about what they've claimed on their map. I'm talking about how the energy connects. And I think that, that's where your discussion about revolution starts, because the energy connects, and then people keep hanging on to their territory. And they don't want to allow that new energy to manifest itself. And
Yeah,
so
they're
I don't
called
know.
rent.
It's what?
It's interesting. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead, please.
Something called rent seekers in economics.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas somebody's an incumbent, and they don't want to necessarily give up their position.
Yeah.
And so essentially that's what is happening when you start to have these where people start to subscribe to one methodology, and they're so invested in it that the investment is like that they don't want to necessarily lose it. So same thing is that, with any kind, and that's why it's so important to capture the where things hit a critical mass, and this paradigm shift has to occur. Like it has to, enough momentum has to be gained in order to unseat somebody that's that currently holds, and it's often rent seeking is often used in things like patents, where they'll actually make a little change to the patent and to a drug patent, and in order to maintain their market.
Right.
So they're trying to stay there and become the only model that works for a particular.
Well, they're trying to maintain their territory,
right. That's
so
the same
they can
thing.
maintain, because they've monetized that territory.
That's
And if
right.
they let go, if they allow that map to change, they suffer financially. And so what my invitation is to realize that, yes, critical mass is an important conversation when it comes to three-dimensional domains. But what this book is talking about is it's talking about energetic domains. And where if we take these, I have this square paradigm over here, although that doesn't look like a square, and I have this triangular paradigm over here, although that doesn't look like a triangle. It looks like they're apart, but actually energetically, they can be quite the same thing. And it's my brain, my 3D brain doesn't want to allow them to connect. And so that's why critical mass is necessary, because you got to get all the old fogies to go away to allow the new paradigm to come out, right? But I think with this book, go ahead.
Well, the other side of that for me, in terms of the sphere definition that you just read, is the two disciplines that I'm most connected with, one psychology and one social work. And there's a lot of overlap. And so it's interesting that you decide as to whether you're going to be in the psychology frame or domain, or in the social work domain. by virtue of what that definition says, that the center, are you closer to the center of one than you are the other? And that sometimes will help you decide, well, I guess I'm more of this discipline than that one, so I'm going to identify with them. But you recognize the overlap. There's an awful lot of the similar kinds of things that are connected to both. But hearing what you read would be a great way of helping people recognize the overlap and to declare themselves in the sense of, well, I actually am a little bit closer to this center than I am the other center. And so that's why I call myself a psychologist or some other name. So I wished I'd had that definition in some of my experiences and dialogues with colleagues in the psychology profession, or even to help students understand where they want to go in further education, whether they want to continue to go down a psychology line, or do you want to continue down a social work line, or maybe you want to do both and at some point.
Right on. Well, again,
Can I intervene here?
sure.
Okay. Come. Look at this.
I'm looking.
Can you see it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Is it beautiful or is it scruffy?
Oh, it's beautiful, Manu.
Okay, I like that. So you put me in a good mood. Okay, to talk about this thing, we have to go back to in math we call it set theory.
Yes.
So we have a set, we have what we call elements, we have all what we call subsets, and we have all what we call complementary within the set. When you have a subset, you can have a complementary of the subset in such a way that the union of the subset and its complementary gives the whole, right?
Okay.
Okay, now get back to this.
How are you spelling complementary, with an E or an I?
Like a complement, like a dual. A complement is very similar to what we have been calling a dual.
Which is that spelling, Richard? What would be the correct spelling in that case? Or are you making a pun?
It's
No,
PLE. It's complement.
E.
PLE.
Yeah.
Not
Compliment is when you praise or
Right.
say nice things about somebody.
Right.
Okay, let me write compliment in the chat.
No,
It's
it's okay, Manu. Don't take that too seriously.
I was
okay.
playing.
It's a
playing
pun.
you a little bit.
It was a pun,
Yeah.
Manu.
Okay. So now look at this. We know general principles. We have a boundary in red there, right?
Okay. Yeah.
We have in blue line of flow of energy.
Yeah.
We have poles because every system, because line of flow of energy determine a polyhedron, right?
Okay.
The line of flow. So it has poles, P1, P2, because every structure has a direction. There's a flow. There are many lines can go back and forth, but there is a resultant that point to one direction or the other. Now, if you take this whole, you can define then that boundary. You can define this line of flow of energy is similar to the VE, to the vector equilibrium. And what is then left within the boundary that is part of a set that we have, that you call it domain. So if you take, for example, a leaf of a plant, right? You see the veins in the leaf. You see the base that is attached to the trunk. That's where energy comes in. And then you see the top, that is like an arrow. Energy goes out there. And then you have the veins, the different veins of a leaf. And in between in between those veins, you have, say, like you have the cabbage that we eat, right? So you have the substance that is the fat of a system. In the same way, if I take a human being, you have your skin and your bones, you have all your nerves, you have all of your arteries and veins, and there's something left. That is the content of it. That is your domain. And it's true. Okay, I see Richard shaking his head. Maybe let me go through and then I'll leave it to you. I'll leave the screen to you. You make your comment. So mathematically, that is your domain. So you have described your system in boundary, in edges, which are the vector, the line of flow of energy, in poles, that is where energy comes in, energy goes out, symbolically, and the remainder is what you call a domain. I'm true. Richard, I saw you shaking your head. So disprove this or I'm open.
Well, I was just responding to that everything that you were describing, and domain is what's left over. And I guess I would see it the other way, that whatever the domain is, that boundary, it's everything that's in it.
I will retort that it depends on what you're talking about. We've been talking about polyhedron here, talking only about the, hold on. We've been talking about polyhedra here and stylizing them with just the line of flow of energy, because we just talk about the edges and then the vertices. That's how we define a polyhedron. And then we say that is a tetrahedron. That's not true. It's not complete, but it's enough for us to understand the notion of tetrahedron. There is a content of the tetrahedron. What is it?
Yeah, well, it connects with what you were saying, that if you drew a circle and put a tetrahedron kind of lines inside it, and then said the domain is everything but those lines that are going in and around, I would have the same sort of feeling that, well, no, I thought the domain of the tetrahedron, if you want, is everything that makes it up in terms of its 4, 6, and 4. And so that's the domain of that particular kind of polyhedron. Another polyhedron would have a different domain, different sort of surroundings, different boundary, I guess. And
Can
so
we go back to?
we were also talking before you came on, not in the context of polyhedrons, but in the context of disciplines and the what's considered a domain in a paradigm sort of sense. And I was also describing how I understood domain in a disciplinary sense, and then which is sort of like an area that one does their work in, and others who do the same kind of work follow an ethic or a guideline or a curriculum, so that they all are defined, if you want, as mathematicians or scientists or engineers. And then the problem that we have coming out of Western science is the notion of domain also can mean dominion or dominion over, and that is not a very nice understanding of domain. But Western science, to a certain extent, adopted that domain and said that that's the domain for science, and no other domains have access, or no other domains are relevant. It's just us material scientists. And now it's being, in a sense, challenged by people in the same fields who are saying that materialism and consciousness actually are together a lot more than one cares to think that they are. And so they're arguing that materialist science is not to be destroyed or thrown out, maybe with the bathwater, but it's to be shrunk so that other domains, if you want, can have some breathing space and can begin to overlap. And then it's interesting with that sphere definition. If I'm an indigenous sort of scientist, let's say, I could define that by saying, well, I'm a little bit closer to that center than I am into my Western science knowledge and development. So I choose to identify as an indigenous scientist and not as a Western or materialist scientist. And somebody else who may have gone through the same experience with you has said, well, yeah, actually, but I feel my center is a little bit closer to traditional material science, but I have shrunk the boundary enough that I'm not going to claim that I have domain over you or I have domain over everything else.
Okay,
So,
I would like to throw in something. Manu, would you hold up that thing your circle with your lines in it again?
Yes, just hold on.
I'd like to discuss that in terms of topologies of energy. Okay, hold it up a little bit higher, please. All right, good. And then I'm going to share it, and I'm going to ask you some questions about it.
Can you
Because
snapshot it? Yes.
what?
Can you take a picture of it so that
Yes,
you can put
I
it
can
on the
share
screen?
I can share your picture. I'm going to share it right now if I can get this dadgum thing to open. There we go.
Are you sure you want to share my pictures?
I'm sharing the picture right now.
No, you say I'm going to share your picture. I'm saying I mean my picture of Manu. Ha!
Do you see it?
Yeah.
All right, so is the red line the universe?
The red line is the boundary.
boundary.
Okay,
The
and so
universe is finite. It has a boundary.
so these are edges. All these lines here are edges.
Yes, yes. Those are lines of flow of energy.
Energy, and evidently a little point right there where it hits that thing, that's a vertex. Evidently there's a vertex there.
Yeah.
Evidently there's a
So
vertex there.
every point when it hits the boundary, for example, and reflect. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Some of the energy goes away in refraction.
See,
I didn't put that because I don't want to confuse the system.
you betcha.
But
And so my point about this is that we're starting now. I mean, this kind of looks like a hypergraph where every
it's something
point,
like that. Yeah, it's a
yeah, where
concept.
every point in the graph is connected to every other point in the graph in some way. Some have more connections or more closely connected connections. Some are more distant, and that would depend on maybe how much energy that's in that circuit. Maybe these are closer together, but there's not as much energy in that circuit as there is at a bigger one. There's more energy, maybe. In other words, what I like about this map is that it's more a topological map. It's more of an energetic map than it is going back to this concept of domain, where we have this set paradigm or region. I want to share that, and I see that I'm not just sharing my screen, I'm only sharing, am I sharing my screen? I am sharing my
Yeah.
screen. So I looked up domain. Domain means an area of territory owned or controlled by a ruler or government, or second definition is a specified sphere of activity or knowledge. And these again go back to the traditional Van chart type 2D representations of a 3D reality. And again, I believe this is talking about a 4D reality, more of a hypergraph. It's talking more about topology than it is about topography. And we normally, when we consider a domain, we consider it as topography. Now, what's interesting is I look up the etymology of the word domain, and it means belonging to the Lord.
Yes.
And so when it's like when the Bible says, here you go, it's your domain, we give you dominion over the animals. This is what the Bible says. What they mean is we give you the opportunity to be the Lord over those animals,
Mhm.
not to be their bosses, but but be with these animals in a way that supports them in experiencing the full measure of their creation, not what you want them to do. You don't want, we want them to go into the meat factory and come out as pork chops. But the Lord would have them have their little families and live their little lives and be pigs or cattle. But human beings don't want pigs or cattle, they want food. And so what happens is the dominus relationship, the Lord relationship, the dominus relationship becomes a dominion. It becomes a domain. And so I'm going to show you this because I think what Manu, this little picture right here that Manu's doing, is very much the same as this guy right here. You see, what we're seeing is we're seeing the 3D manifestation of the energy in that object switching around into all sorts of physical shapes based on the reality of the fact that that energy that's in that donut can just as easily be a freaking coffee cup. And but I'm going to call this, okay, I have the domain of the donut and you have the domain of the coffee cup, and we're going to argue about it. It's a coffee cup, and I'm going to say, no, it's a freaking donut. But it's actually the same freaking thing, just manifesting differently in a three-dimensional paradigm. And
Steve,
yeah.
I don't know if people understand what when you talk about hypergraph. I don't know if they grasp the power of it. A hypergraph is taking dimension n being whatever it is, and just crushing down it, putting it down into something that is in 2 dimensions for us to make a sense of it. That's what hypergraph means.
Yeah.
Taking something that is of dimension 20, 30, and put it in down onto a flat sheet so that ants can understand what it is.
See, maybe Wikipedia. Oh, look, here's a good hypergraph. Yeah, so, yeah. And in reality, everything is connected, like in a hypergraph, but we want to call it a donut, or we want to call it a coffee cup, and we're going to fight about it. And I think what the book is trying to get us to do is to see not a 3D topography of the universe, but to see a 4D topology of universe. In other words,
even more, Steve, even more.
Even more.
What the graph is trying to see is to show us the vector equilibrium. That is a 12D universe.
Say that again, if what?
The vector equilibrium is a 12D universe. You know that, huh?
Yeah, I said that before you came on. You
Yes.
take any vertex.
So the hypergraph is trying to show us that you can see in 12 dimensions.
Yeah. And any point in the isotropic vector matrix is its own vector equilibrium, and that's 12 dimensions, because it has 12 degrees of freedom coming off of that vertex, creating that cube octahedron. And I want to think of it as, okay, here's a cube octahedron, and here's a cube octahedron, or here's a tetrahedron, and here's a polyhedron of some sort. But that's when I do that, I convert it to a 3D thing. And what I want to do is, what I'm trying to get out of this book is, forget about the 3D manifestation. You know, is it a pine cone or an acorn? That's the 3D manifestation. We're looking at the topology of it. We're looking at the energy of it, and it manifests as an acorn, and it manifests as a pine cone, and as a different kind of things. I remember we used to have these trees in LA that you'd have to have the long things that look like a pea pod, and there are the beans in it, and the tree would have flowers, and then they would form these big long things. So people argue over trees, but what this is inviting us to look at is treeness. And treeness is a 4-dimensional or 12-dimensional. I like that you reminded me of that, Manu. It's a 12-dimensional reality. And I want to see things in 3D. And that's why it takes critical mass, is to move that 3-dimensional and have that 3-dimensional shift. What we're doing in this book is we're looking at 12 dimensions.
Hmm.
Okay, I think I've finished my rant. Richard,
Can
did
I
you-
say something again? Has
Okay.
any of you ever put together manifest and recycling?
Put together manifest what?
Manifestation. You
I
talk,
have.
you say manifestation of something. Something can manifest in 2D, in 3D, in 4D, but it is topologically the same stuff that is manifested, that is taking different forms.
Right.
Now, have you ever put that together with recycling, our practical thing of recycling?
Of recycling.
Yes. If I take steel, right, I
Okay.
melt it again, steel that was used, and I melt it again to do something else. I'm recycling steel, right?
I
And
suppose,
that
yeah.
is a manifestation, a different manifestation of that steel.
Yeah, recycling is a different manifestation. So, Richard, do you have something go for it?
No, I was just responding yes to the question in terms of have I ever taken something that's common and showed its manifestations, different manifestations. And I
Yes.
was challenged to try that when I was in India for 6 months. I won't go into the context, but all of a sudden, as I was learning more about the great religions and so forth, I started to think that I wonder if the tetrahedron as a form or structure, it underlines all of the basic, sort of great religion symbols, like the Christian cross, like the Buddhist or Hindu swastikas, about the indigenous medicine wheel and the um, uh, there was one other, but and so I started to work with the model in a different way, and the Star of David and the Star of Solomon. So I was trying to say, is there something common underneath the Muslim religion, the Jewish religion, the Christian religion, the indigenous spirituality, the Buddhist and Hindu? And I found a way to use for the tetrahedron to change into all of those manifestations, those symbols. And so it's for
Well,
me, it was sort of saying all of these different religious manifestations or philosophical manifestations are all grounded to the same common structure underneath.
did you make a video of that, Richard?
No, I didn't make a
I
video of
think that
that.
would be a great meme. So
Um,
you took a tetrahedron and made a swastika out of it.
yeah, and I
And
made
did
both
you
swastikas out of it. I made the left one and the right one. I also could make the Nazi one, and I could make the medicine wheel. I could make the Christian cross, and I could make the Star of David and the Solomon of David, all just using two triangles that make up a tetrahedron.
cool. Let me see what that just inspired me on some topic. What did it inspire me on? Um, oh yeah.
So anyway, it was my answer yes to Manu's question if I ever tried something like that, and that's one of the places I tried it.
Cool. So are you telling me that I can take a tetrahedron and I can make, where'd it go?
Well, basically take two triangles
I
The
can
two-
take two triangles. I'm
And you
just
could,
really challenged because you made those symbols, but they have right angles on them. So I'm just thinking about this guy over here. Um, you know, can you do this with, look, there's two triangles right there.
yeah, right.
And
And
we've correlated the tetrahedron to the yin yang regularly.
yeah, I saw, I've got a printout of what you did. Yeah,
Yeah, very cool.
but, and the Star of David there,
Yeah.
for a long time, I couldn't find a symbol that connected to the Muslim religion. And I had students that I challenged to see what they could find when they were traveling during the summer, and they would come back with all kinds of things that they had taken a picture in a mosque and so forth and so on. But we could never come up with what I thought was that manifestation. And then 2 years ago, in one of the trim tab groups, and I think it was probably, I was going to say it was Kirby Unner, but it wasn't. It was another fellow. And I put this experience out there and said, gee, I found all these different manifestations except in the Muslim religion. And he just looked at me, he says, well, that's easy. I can solve that in a second. And I said, yeah, what? He says, well, the Star of David is a Jewish symbol and the Star of Solomon is a Muslim symbol, and it's the same thing.
Oh, wow.
Two triangles put together the way that the Star of David is. And one religion calls it the what is it, the Song of Solomon or something Solomon,
Huh.
and the other Star of David. And so this puzzle that I've been trying to put together for 20 years just fell into place in 2 seconds.
I love it. I love it. I love it when the synchronicity of something I've been contemplating for 20 years falls together in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
It blows
Can
my
you put that
mind.
coexist up again?
Okay.
I was writing it down here when
Oh,
you
were
switched
you?
up.
I'll
Yeah, they coexist,
one,
coexist.
which one do you like?
Yeah,
Do you
that's
like
fine.
this one down here or which one?
The one with the Muslim coexist. Yeah, that one. T and then the cross. That's what I was looking at.
I noticed that Arabic tends to be a little bit uh, elusive. And like for here's the
Yeah.
that's the namaste or the Hindu, it tends to be a little bit elusive to a triangle because there's so many
Yeah.
curves. So
Yeah.
it seems to be more, I tell you what, Manu, I could just put that in a graphic and send it to you.
Okay, that's
Can I
cool.
do that?
Yeah.
And I'll just put it in the chat for everybody.
Mm.
I wish that the chat would hold graphics, but it doesn't, and that really bothers me. There we go. Coexist. And then I'm gonna leave this up to you, Richard, to do to find the Hindu relationship with two triangles, and you're gonna spend the rest of your life until all of a sudden it'll just
No,
fall into place.
there's a
It
Hindu
is,
swastika,
yeah.
and
Oh, I
there's a
see.
Buddhist one as well.
It is interesting that Muhammad was a fundamentalist Christian. Do you know that?
It was, say what again?
Muhammad was a fundamentalist Christian.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Somebody
Who got pissed off?
tell the Muslims
Yeah.
that.
Nobody said that. Who got pissed off with the way Christianism was being
They all come from Abraham.
Yeah. Well, what Manu
no,
is saying is
I'm
that,
even talking about his practice. He was a fundamental Christian.
yeah, that he was a fundamental
In
Christian that got
600,
mad
he was a fundamental Christian.
and was not pleased with how Christianity was manifesting itself on the planet.
Yes, especially the traders in the whole Arabia, how they were practicing Christianism.
Yeah, isn't that strange how everything is so connected, and then once we establish a domain, we tend to get rigid and separated.
Right.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, but I don't think that the problem is in establishing the domain itself. It is in the dogma that come with it.
Well, to me,
You know, if I establish a domain, but I know that it is temporary, it is an anti-entropic something that I build that will change. I'm open to change. That will be fine.
yeah,
But if I make it,
those-
if I make it the permanence, that's serious. That's
Well,
something
that's
else.
the other component of science that we were talking about before you came on, in terms of
Right.
what constitutes a science.
And you're a freaking idealist, Manu, and so you tend to drive people. Anybody that's trapped in a 3D paradigm is just, they're not going to stand a chance when they enter your space. It's like Manu is the Hilbert space of Bucky calls.
Don't. Oh no.
You guys know what Hilbert space is, right? It's just another domain. It's just a place where weird differential calculations can occur. Now I'm challenged. Hey, did you guys see I had the coexistence sticker in the chat? So if you want to pull it down there, you can.
Oh, is it Lee?
What? I put it in the
Is
chat.
it Lee?
Yeah,
Okay.
that is Lee behind me.
Hi, Lee.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm fine.
Okay, excellent.
She has a friend from in town, and so she wasn't going to attend the call, but evidently that meeting ended early, and here she is. She snuck in. I was going to look something up to make everybody. Any other comments or questions? It's
you know,
10:36.
I've been listening, and you know, I just apologize because you know, I'd mentioned the fragility of life a moment ago. Somebody who's just, you know, about 20 feet from me was flatlining, and you know, they had about 20 people and be able to revive the person.
Wow.
It was an amazing thing to be able to witness, you know, that fear, and then the relief, I guess is the best way to say it.
But the person revived?
Yeah. And they had
I'll
20
tell you
people
what.
in there, and I mean, but this is where you kind of, you know, it reminds you what's good. You know, it really, really, really worked. I mean, everybody was in there. Anyway, I was still listening.
Well, good. Well, you're in a domain that matters.
It was really, I mean, and the satisfaction, you know, that the people took is really.
I want
Actually
to share with you guys what a
scary
Hilbert.
too.
What's that?
It was scary. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to share with you guys. I'm sorry to be so focused. I'm ADHD, so you know I'm relentless. But this is the definition of Hilbert space. You guys ready? A Hilbert space is a vector space equipped with an inner product that is also a complete metric space. This means it's a space where you can define notions of distance and angle, and where sequences that converge in a specific sense, Cauchy sequences, actually have a limit within the space. Essentially, it's a generalization of Euclidean space to potentially infinite dimensions, providing a framework for analyzing infinite dimensional vector spaces. So I thought I would just add that to our conversation to pile one more straw on the camel's back before the camel explodes. So there's your Hilbert space definition. But it goes along with vectors, at least, you know?
Yeah. But you wonder whether if if you just shown that to Bucky Fuller and he saw the reference to Euclidean math, he might have sort of blown up on the spot of saying, you know, get that guy out of here. Where's Euler? It's all about Euler.
Right. And I want to share Manu's little thing again, because to me, you see, all these little lines that Manu shared over here, that's how that energy maps in a 2D space. In fact, it's likely that the radius that connects this vector with this vector is the same size as the radius that connects this vector with this vector. But it manifests differently in a 3D space, just like a donut can manifest as a coffee cup, but it's exactly the same energy, just manifesting differently in 3D space. I just thought I would say that just because I want to give Mona credit for driving me crazy. Okay, it's 10:41. Lee, how are you feeling and what do you anticipate getting out? Why did you drop in this late in the night?
Because I didn't want to miss it. I didn't know. I have a very young friend who came. He's my adopted son for many years. And his blood pressure, I took his blood pressure. He looked sick. And a friend drove him here because she was worried about him. His blood pressure was 159/93, just a little too high. So she is an EMT and her son's an EMT, and I sent him with her back to her house.
Cool.
And she's close to a hospital. So, yeah, I was a little worried about him. So I had time, just a little bit. I am loving this class or this group of people. Richard, what have you taken from this wonderful class that I missed?
Thank you, Lee. How you
Yeah,
feeling?
thank
What you
you.
taking away, Richard?
Well, it's so often is the case, by the end of the sessions, one is more energized than before. And so it could be low energy to much higher energy. It could be high energy, even higher. And anyway, I really, even though we didn't read any of the material, I really enjoyed going back to the discussion of domain and methodologies and the manifestation of something into something different out of the same common framework. And I wasn't thinking about this or expecting something like this, but to be able to share what I was trying to do with the two triangles of a tetrahedron, or the two triangles that can make up a four triangle tetrahedron, and how they could make up the Christian symbol, the indigenous medicine wheel symbol, the Star of David, um, the I'm going to say Star of Solomon, but that's not quite right. And the Buddhist swastika and the Hindu swastika, and even if you want the Nazi swastika. And they all come out of the same two triangles that form a tetrahedron. So I say that the great religions of the world are all manifestations from the same structure or minimum whole framework. I don't get a chance to sort of say that to too many people because it usually would take quite a long time to try and explain the tetrahedron and the two triangles before I could get to the manifestation into these other symbols. So that's, I feel complete and glad I'm taking away what I am. And Manu, how are you feeling? What are you taking away?
I'm feeling good. I mean, I'm on the train. You guys want to leave? I don't want to leave, but I yield to the decision of the majority. It is an interesting train, and really what we discussed today. I think that we are hitting this on this later course on some fundamentals that clarify the mind, and that also open the mind to be more flexible in adapting to what it is. We cannot bend nature for long. We might dent something, but it's not going to last. It's going to heal. So we better kind of understand how it works, how energy flow, and how we can use that to accommodate ourselves and have less wars, more understanding, more building, and a better life for all. That is what I take away. So I'm grateful for everything else. Joe, how do you feel? What do you take away?
I guess
Where's
Joe.
Joe?
Oh, you good, Joe? I'll share, and then hopefully Joe will complete his hospital thing. By the way, Joe sent over a graph there in the chat. If you guys want to take a look at that, I'm pulling it up right now, and I'm going to share it. And we'll discuss it while Joe's gone. Here it comes. There you go. Are you guys all seeing that?
No, not yet.
There you go. Are you seeing it now?
Not yet.
No, not yet.
There we go. My computer says it's out there on the
Yeah.
So here's he gives an example of a hypergraph where this is where not all points are connected to all points, which is what a tetrahedron is, and I think what the isotropic vector matrix is. Remembering that the energy connection is the radial, and all the radials are the same size, but the way they manifest in space look different. In fact, I just remembered another graphic I wanted to share with you for my takeaway. Here's another animal here. One line graph. If Joe, if you ever get your microphone and you want to talk about what this means, here's a 3-line graph, which I don't understand because it only has 1 line and 2 dots. This is a 2-line graph, but it has 3 dots with 3 lines, so I don't understand that. Dual hypergraph. Yeah, it'd be nice if Joe could explain that, but he seems to be engaged. So I would like to share one more thing with you, if I may, as part of my takeaway, because again, I want to come out of this 3D paradigm, or out of this 2D, 3D paradigm, and move into a 12-dimensional reality. As far as my takeaway goes, I had this epiphany a few weeks ago, and Manu reminded me of it tonight. The IVM is a 12-dimensional space. And somehow we experience things in 2 and 3 dimensions, and in dimensions we aren't able to graph, like emotion is one of those dimensions, I'm sure. Thought is another one of those dimensions, I'm sure. And I tend to think that thought is not as real as my body is, but that's my problem. Because, like the Buddha said, and most of us know, that, thoughts create speech, speech creates behavior, behavior creates habits, habits create personality, personality create destiny. And so
Yes.
it's all energy manifesting in a different way. And I would like to share, to me, this is the ultimate video of of a conversation between 2D space and 3D space. And then if we go to a 12D space, the mind gets blown away. But if you can recognize this, you guys, this is a solar system.
Mhm.
It's how, and then now, so we have all these little 3D objects. They're all lined up here on the solar disk as part of our thing. But when we start this puppy up, they start moving and we say, oh, there's the orbits of the planets, but hold it. They're not in 2 dimensions, they're in 3 dimensions. And that's what it really looks like.
Wow.
And so it's this whole idea of this, of the solar disk, is a total fabrication of a 2D, 3D mindset paradigm. That's life right there. Somehow I want to understand that better. Somehow I want to see, when I look at a tree, I want to see that. Anyway, I thought that was kind of fun. I'll put that thing in the, that's because that's a short one. I'll put that in the chat too. I missed some of our other people. I think Anne usually comes on the call. I missed her. Hoping the best.
She sent a note.
She did send a note because I looked for a note. I didn't see anything. What'd she say?
She screwed up again.
She forgot again, huh?
She
This is
forgot
just
again,
a
but
long
she
day
was
of the week
busy,
for her, right?
busy doing something and forgot to tell us that she wouldn't be
Yeah,
there.
there she is. 2 weeks in a row. She lost track that it's Sunday.
Can I add something here
Okay.
to your
I'm
comments,
complete.
Steve?
I'm complete,
Yes.
so add something, Manu.
Let's just
You
take
have
your
9 minutes,
definition
Manu,
of,
because Manu, you have 9 minutes. I'm pulling the plug.
okay.
All right.
Just look at your definition of Hilbert space. 2 words struck my mind. It is that, it's a Hilbert space is a vector space equipped with an inner product that is also a complete metric space. This means it is a space where you can define notion of distance and angle. Distance and angle. Distance and angle. Does it
Right.
remind you of anything fundamental? Duality of spin and orbiting. Distance and angle. Orbiting is distance, spin is angle.
Yeah.
It's fundamental, that notion. Is
Yeah.
ubiquitous. It's always, it's everywhere. If you understand that basics, it is part of a key to many things. So we should strive, whoever we talk to understand what duality really means, not just, like people stereotype it, and in a common lingo, that duality is fighting, is opposite. It's not. It's never been that. Duality is a complement to make a whole. Full stop.
Yeah.
Who is my partner for tango? They say there's a tango party. Who's my partner? If I don't have a partner, I cannot tango. It takes 2 to tango.
You
So
just traumatized me.
the whole is a tango, and you need partners.
Manu, you just traumatized me. One
Why?
time, because my brother one time, and this happened several times, but this was the beginning. We made some really cool pirate swords for Halloween. We took some 3/8 plywood and we cut out these really cool. We had a little bandsaw, portable bandsaw, and we or a what are
Fret
those?
saw.
What?
A fret saw.
Yeah, jigsaw. Anyway, and we cut out these really cool swords, and we were clomping each other. And I think my brother ended up with a bloody nose. And my mom comes out, grabs those swords from both of us, and starts spanking both of us. And my brother goes, "Why are you beating me? He hit my nose." And my mom said, "It takes 2 to tango." And from then on, when
Exact.
any one of us got in trouble, we both got in trouble because
Yes.
nobody got in trouble by themselves. So I'm totally traumatized, Manu. That was very inconsiderate of you.
Sorry.
Okay, my friends. Peace.
Bye.
Joe, blessings to you and to your mother and to those people in the hospital.
Yeah,
Make
it's
sure
not nice. It's not nice to be around in hospital. It can be traumatizing.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
real trauma right there. All right. See you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Nice seeing
Good night,
you.
all.
Yeah.